Hi, I'm Chorn. We're going to have a look today at the implementation of strategy, or more precisely, why it is that 50% of strategy fails due to poor design. Now, the whole question of strategy execution is really one that plays on the mind of many managers. Most people know that it's one thing to get the strategy right, but it's entirely another to make sure that it's executed effectively and efficiently, and so that it allows the organization to produce the quality results that it wants to. So why is it that 50% of strategy fails to poor design? Well, perhaps just for a moment, let's examine what we mean by design. By design, we mean the structure of the organization, its processes, its systems, and the culture that actually emerges from that particular setup within the organization. Now, I'm going to argue today that to a large extent, we use the wrong model when we think of, when we design, and when we build our organizations. And this has really reached a critical point, particularly with these conditions of uncertainty and change which we're experiencing in our environment at the moment. To a large extent, the model that has really dominated our thinking has been the model of the machine. It's not difficult to understand why, when so many organizations are really dominated and run by baby boomers and Gen Xers who've all grown up in an age where the machine was king, the age of automation, of really sophisticated machines. And in a sense, this is still a hangover of the Industrial Revolution. But it may just be useful for a moment to examine why the machine metaphor or the machine model has been such a powerful one for us as we think about our organizations. Essentially, what the machine metaphor or what the machine model of the organization has really given us is a whole series of very significant benefits. Things like the ability to standardize and improve efficiency, like the ability to specialize and create division of labor, which reduces complexity in our organization, to align our goals and really get our objective setting correct, to create hierarchies of authority within the organization and making them easier to manage and control, to improve the way we plan and control the organization, which enables us to do forecasting of demand, and finally to use extrinsic rewards, which has allowed us to really develop levels of compliance. But there are a number of issues which are really inherent in this model which are no longer valid. I mean, for example, we know that the use of extrinsic rewards, those are rewards outside of the work, such as pay and conditions, for example, are not really as effective as we move into a knowledge economy. They're great for manual labor, but not for knowledge workers by and large. So, in a sense, these particular models that we've used of the machine have been very advantageous, but the benefits have all come at the tremendous expense of adaptability. So these organizations that have been designed like a machine have been unable to adapt and change quickly enough and in the correct ways to suit our changing environmental conditions. So what seems to work? Well, I guess what's really interesting is that if we look around us and we ask ourselves, what is the thing that has managed to survive all the ravages that this planet has thrown us? Floods, storms, cyclones, fire, famine, tsunamis, earthquakes, and the answer seems to be life. So life. What's life all about, and how might we learn from it to really design, build and create and manage much better organizations that are better able to execute their strategy effectively and to create conditions for people that are actually supportive of those people and draw the best out of those people? Well, if we examine the whole model of life and some of the principles of nature and biology around us, there are a number of things which we learn about the way we might want to run our organizations. The first thing we know is that we need to create a symbiotic relationship with our customers. Customers are not data. Living organizations or organizations that embody life really treat their customers as people before they treat them as data. So they recognize people in terms of their needs and their behaviors rather than simply he or she is a male or a female between the ages of 25 and 45 living in the northwest suburb of Sydney. Those demographic details tell us very little about the needs and the wants and who the real people are. So we need to find different ways of segmenting our markets. We talk about using psychographics to segment our market, which really helps us understand who the real person is that we call a customer. And as a consequence, we can develop value propositions which really speak directly to the needs of those customers and create this relationship between the customer and ourselves where they depend on us for the service and the product we provide, and we depend on them for the kind of value that they offer us by way of what they pay for the product. So you've got this completely symbiotic relationship between ourselves and our customers where we treat each other with great respect. The second principle that becomes very evident when looking at life and biology and studying of living things is that we need to remain relevant through ongoing adaptation and change. One of the things we might observe about all living things, whether they be animals, whether they be insects, or whether they be plants, is that they continuously change. Any living thing is manifested by continuous change, provided there is an advantage for reproduction. So what this means to us then is that our organizations have got to be continuously monitoring the needs, and as these needs change of our customers, so we need to be responding to them. We need to do more than that. We need to actually define what our business is around the needs of those customers and keep changing that business definition, not because we want to glean an extra 2 or 3 percentage points of margin or because the shareholder wants additional returns, but rather because the needs of our customers have changed. And it becomes a self-evident truth that the better the job we do at meeting the needs of our customers, the more likely we are to earn above average returns for our shareholders. The third principle is that design and form should really reflect function. One of the things that becomes very evident again from studying nature is that the shape and form of a particular animal or plant is so closely suited to the function it has to perform. So my take on this is quite clear. I regard design or structure as the ultimate form of strategy. Why do I say this? Because it actually reflects the priorities that the organization has set itself and the way it's decided to allocate resources and the priorities it's actually made and the trade-offs that it's made in the way that it actually sets these resources up. So design and form should really reflect function. That's a pretty critical factor, and we talk about how the shape of the market will affect the shape of the organization. We know that learning and growth is really required to support ongoing adaptation. The whole concept of natural selection, for example, is one of the critical center points of biology. We know that this is how species adapt, this is how species evolve. But there are a few critical determinants of natural selection. One of them is biodiversity. So we know, for example, that if a species doesn't have enough biodiversity or diversity in its gene pool, the process of natural selection will not occur. And as a consequence, you will find that the species will no longer evolve and might eventually die out as a result of it no longer suiting the needs of the environment. The other factor that's particularly important in this regard is the whole notion of experimentation and built-in redundancy. The notion of built-in redundancy, for those of you that are interested, does not come from the software environment, where I guess they've taken that whole principle to heart, but it actually comes from nature, where you find that species will actually develop in slightly different ways, and each one of those elements in the species is in fact capable of performing a similar but slightly different function. Take your garden, for example. You've got beetles, you've got ants, you've got worms. They all aerate the soil, they all keep the soil mobile and move nutrients around. Get rid of the beetles, you're still going to have a living garden. Get rid of the beetles and the ants, you probably got a chance with worms. Get rid of all three, and all of a sudden the whole system fails. So in fact, organizations need to continuously experiment with new things, need to ensure that they have built-in redundancy, and they're quite happy with this idea of continuous trying out new things, some of them failing, to ensure that adaptation continues. And finally, the need to embody the past, the present, and the future. Every living thing around you is a symbol of the history that it has gone through, a recognition of the need to relate effectively to the present, and an understanding of what might be required into the future. We talk about future building as such a process, where we encourage the organization through a very different approach to the way it plans and thinks about the future, and indeed accommodates alternative futures. We show the organization how it is possible to really do this, to imagine different futures and to prepare itself for each of these. That's really what we mean by future building and the use of strategic intuition. So I hope these few lessons have been very interesting. I hope they've kind of got you to think somewhat differently about organization design and business models. And most of all, I hope they've got you to understand that simply improving the execution of your strategy is not just simply tweaking a few things. It's about thinking and rethinking the whole way you design your organization and the business model. I'm Chorn. Thanks very much.